friends, welcome to All By My Shelf. I'm Miss Rachel and it's so nice to see you. Today's panel is The Mind Matters, Mental Health in YA. 5 incredible authors are here today to share with you what it takes to talk about the brain in fiction. Those authors are Jennifer Dugan, Kathleen Glasgow, McDowell, Deaver, and Ronni Davis. If you're a Glenside patron, make sure you click the link in the description marked Glenside. That will bring you to a page telling you all of the e-copies you are currently able to place on hold or check out. And if you're more of a hard copy person, you can fill out the form and tell me exactly which books to put on hold for you when the library is able to reopen. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to our mental health panel. I'm going to start by having all of our lovely panelists introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their book. So anyone can start.
Well, my book's right here, so I'll start. I'm Ronni Davis. I wrote When the Stars Lead to You, which is a love story with STEM and mental illness and class issues and private schools and kissing. So it came out in November from Little Brown. And other than being a writer, I'm a copy editor. I love going to Disney World when it's open. And I like to collect things like Funko Pops and pins and notebooks and tote bags and all the other stuff that authors like to collect. So I live in Chicago and yeah, good times.
I can go next. I'm Mason Deaver, author of I Wish You All the Best, which is a young adult contemporary novel about a non-binary teenager who is kicked out of their home when they try to come out to their parents, and it doesn't go so well, and they have to reunite with their sister they haven't seen in a decade, attend a new school. But with that sort of upheaval comes a chance at a better life whenever Ben meets Nathan, a charismatic classmate who takes Ben under his wing. And it's a love story, and it kind of, builds on that. There's kissing, just like Ronnie's book. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I write full-time. My second book, The Ghost We Keep, comes out who knows, kind of in limbo right now. Look for it in 2021-ish. But yeah, that's me.
I can go next. So I'm Jennifer Dugan, the author of Brona Comics and Hot Dog Girl. Brona Comics came out April 21st, and it's a loose Romeo and Juliet retelling set in the comic industry. So it follows Ridley and Jubilee as they try to navigate first love, identity, mental health issues, feuding families, and all of that set within the comics industry. I live in upstate New York, and I also write full-time. And yeah, that's all I got.
I can go next. I'm Kathleen Glasgow, and I wrote Girl in Pieces, which is about 17-year-old Charlie Davis's journey of self-harm and self-discovery. And my second book was How to Make Friends with the Dark, which is about Tiger Tolliver and her experiences after her mother dies suddenly when she's 16. So it's very much a grief book that examines what happens when you lose the most important person in your life, who technically should be the person helping you through the greatest loss of your life. I have 2 more books coming out, one in 2021 and one in 2022, and I live in Tucson.
Okay, my name is Karen McDowell, and my book is One Way or Another. This comes out October 6th from Scholastic. It's a YA rom-com about Paige, and Paige has really bad anxiety. It's not diagnosed at the beginning of the book, but she has a really hard time making decisions. She tends to spiral like into the worst possible scenario. She's like, but what if this small decision like makes all these bad things happen? So at the beginning of the book, she's given the chance to either spend her winter break from school in visiting New York, where she's always wanted to go, and spending time in New York with her mom, or she gets an invitation to go to this snowy mountain cabin with her best friend Fitz, who she's also secretly in love with, and she has to decide, and she doesn't know how to do it, so she downloads this decision-making magic 8-ball app to her phone and decides that she's going to let this thing make all her decisions. And then the book splits into 2 timelines, so we get to see what happens when she goes to New York, and then what happens when she goes to the cabin. So yeah, that's out in October, and I live in Mesa, Arizona, and that's it.
Excellent. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so I feel like it's very fitting that we've got this panel going. There will be a content warning in the description if you're worried about any subjects that might be potentially triggering for you. I'll compile them and put them in that description so you can check and see sort of where those discussions happen, if they do. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you all about, so mental health, just in general. Like, it's not just about mental illness, you know, it's about everyone has mental health as just a human being. Like, everyone should be like paying attention to it. But I wanted to talk about the portrayal of mental health specifically in all of your books, and how that sort of manifests, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's just this extreme grief after a traumatic event. If you can just talk a little bit about the way mental health and mental illness plays into your releases, that would be great.
I Wish You All the Best it's a love story, but it's also, to me, the story of Ben coming to terms with their anxiety and their depression. Throughout the course of the book, Ben receives these diagnoses from their therapist, and that was an important thing for me to include because I really felt like at the time, and it's amazing how this changes in like the year since the book was published, and then the year before that when I was writing the book, I felt like there weren't a lot of positive portrayals of therapy in YA, which was really sad to me because therapy is a life-saving thing. Like, thankfully, the weird trope of like the abusive therapist has died, I think, but like just the idea of that really makes my stomach uneasy. Like people just choosing to portray doctors who should be helping people, especially younger teens, portraying them as villainous and like unhelpful when teens should be hearing that therapy can help you, understand these things, understand things about yourself. Your therapist can help you work out the weirdness of your brain chemistry, and if it comes to it, help you find medication that can help you work that out as well. So it was really important to me to show not just that you aren't your mental illness and that you can survive past it and work with it, but also that asking for help is not a bad thing.
I'll go next. So going off what Mason said about encouraging teenagers to seek help and that therapy is a good tool for going through various mental health issues. When I was writing Girl in Pieces, I was really aware of the fact that I did want to talk about kids who don't have access to the mental health system or access to regular care or medication. So Charlie starts the book in a hospital on a 48-hour psychiatric hold. And she does get to stay for a week, but then her insurance won't cover it, and she's kicked out. And so the majority of the book deals with her having to navigate these issues on her own without a supportive family, without access to the one supportive therapist that she met in the hospital. And I really wanted to do that to talk about kids who don't have access to healthcare that some of us who have insurance maybe take for granted. And I think it's a really broken system. There's like 40,000 kids in Arizona right now who need mental health care who don't have it, and don't have it in schools. Like the school that my son goes to, there's one counselor for 600 kids. So, you know, I really wanted to highlight that fact that some kids don't have proper channels to get help, and sometimes they have to learn how to do it on their own.
I wanted with my book, it's kind of unique in that it's not my main character who has the she's not going through the depression. It's the boy that she loves who's going through depression. And I wanted to show this boy who, I mean, as someone with depression, like we feel unlovable. Like at least I do a lot of the time. And so I wanted to show a book where someone deeply loves someone who has depression. But also the book ended up taking a turn where she also has to find a balance of when can, like she can only, like realizing she can only do so much for him, and also taking care of her own mental health in the process. And so that's kind of like Devin's journey. And when the stars lead to you is like, how far do I go to make sure he's okay, but making sure I'm okay too. And also I wanted to talk about, like what Mason said with the therapy. I remember in early drafts is that my therapist was one of those like mean therapists, and it's only now that I realized that it was really like my own internal thoughts coming out, like I was projecting that. And I wonder if that's why a lot of therapists come across that way in books, is that the authors are putting their own self-talk and their own glasses and filters. And so when they hear the therapist who's trying to help them, it sounds like an attack, or they take it as an attack. So I definitely worked on that, and my therapist is way better in the book now. And yeah, I think that's just, I really do feel like that's coming a long way too, that therapists are starting to see more like, hey, we're here, we're your allies, we're here to help you, we want you to get better. So yeah.
So jumping off that, that's really similar to some of the themes in Verona Comics. So Jubilee is kind of an overachieving people pleaser, and Ridley really struggles with very severe anxiety disorder, depression. There are some instances of mentions of suicidal ideation and things like that. And I wanted to kind of show a realistic look at what it's like to love someone that's going through that, and what the impact that can have on all of your relationships, the person who loves them, the person going through it. It was very important to me that I didn't do a like love cures all. I really wanted to show that the characters have to, you know, work at it, and it's not like you meet this perfect person who fulfills you. I really explore the idea of codependency in relationships and the impact that that kind of thing can have. Because I've seen some, I think there is definitely a place for these like kind of like manic pixie dream girl whirls in and fixes everything. And from like an escapist point of view, I love those stories. But the reality is when you are living with it or loving someone with it, there's going to be ups and downs, and you're going to, so I wanted to show that you can find the joy even in the midst of darkness. But that it's not necessarily like an instant, like flick a switch, happily ever after kind of thing.
So in my book, one of the things that I wanted to do was I really didn't want Paige to have her diagnosis at the beginning of the story, because I think a lot of teenagers and even older people, like I was in my 20s, when I started to realize like maybe maybe there's a name or a label for, the things that I'm going through. And so she is just kind of, throughout the book, like grappling with, is like my brain normal, or are other people, going through these things, or do other people have the same troubles that she does making decisions? And, there's some talk about labels, and when someone, suggests therapy for her, her first instinct is like, well, I'm not that bad. There are a ton of people out there who have it way worse than me. And then towards the end of the book, when she does go to therapy and she ends up on medication, and she realizes that there's no like threshold of pain that you have to meet in order to like qualify for therapy. Like you said at the beginning, Rachel, therapy, like everybody has mental health that they need to check in with. And so it can just be really good for a lot of people, whether you have a specific diagnosis or not, which she does have severe anxiety and panic disorder. But I think the book just is like a lot of, hopefully it'll help people like reach out, or teenagers who are just thinking like, hey, is this like, maybe could I check in with someone about this, and end up getting help that they need.
I think that's a really important point to make about mental health issues in YA, is that often kids don't have the language to know what they're going through. And by reading these books about these issues, they can see themselves and say, hey, that's how I feel. And they can put maybe a name to it or a thread of hope to it. Like, I see myself in this character, or in Ronnie's case, I see myself in this friend who is watching their friend suffer through depression. What can I do? Because they don't have the tools. Like, no matter how much some schools try to give kids the tools, often they don't know how to utilize them or use them. And we can't expect them to take on too much themselves because they're kids. And I think that's the most important thing about the books that we're writing, is that we're letting kids explore these issues in a safe way through a book.
That perfectly leads into my next question. Just absolutely perfectly. So one of the reasons that we have Mental Health Awareness Month is to sort of help shatter the stigma around mental health, and asking for help and all of that sort of stuff. And so I was wondering for y'all if there was any media, or like books, movies, TV, that sort of helped break the stigma for you, or that you've read and you thought to yourself as you were reading, you were like, yes, this is going to really help others. Like, I know two of those books for me. One was Kathleen's A Girl in Pieces, and then Becky Albertalli's Upside Down Unrequited. So I was wondering if there were any suggestions that y'all had for stuff like that.
For me, whenever I was a teenager, which, like, weird to say was not that long ago, I feel like there wasn't anything that told me about anxiety and depression. Whenever I was a teenager, if it felt like depression was like a joke, like, oh, you're just so depressed, like it's whatever, get over it. Like, I wish that I had something like that for teenagers nowadays. I really recommend Darius the Great Is Not Okay by Deaver. That I don't want to say a book has like the best mental health rep. That feels like a weird award to give Adib, but like, he handles depression and anxiety very well in Darius the Great. And I really think that it can benefit a lot of kids today, especially young teens who thankfully have access to that book now.
I can't think of anything, I mean, other than like, yeah, Darius the Grey is not okay. Definitely, for sure. But I remember just watching a lot of shows, and like the person who had a mental illness was just kind of portrayed as really off the rails and unhinged. And I knew that I did not want my characters to be portrayed that way, that though these are, normal kids who are just they're going through it. They're not necessarily like, the one that comes to mind is the show The OC, and the character Oliver, and how he was just really off the rails, just over the top. And obviously it was done for ratings. And I said I didn't want to have that kind of shock value in the book. I just wanted to feel real and organic. And so I think I just more so went towards what I don't want to see, which is what helped inspire me, as opposed to having something positive out there. Just what I was exposed to in my, I guess, formulative time.
Well, I think I'm like the oldest person on this panel. So for me, growing up, like what were called young adult books weren't really talking about depression and the issues that I was going through specifically. So however you feel about this book, The Catcher in the Rye was the first book that I read where the character was depressed, and it was the novel. That was the subject of the novel. And Holden Caulfield's voice really spoke to me at 12, because I was like, my God, that's how I feel. I feel like the world is a sham. I feel like I can't express myself. And when I do, no one understands me. And the second book was The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, another book about mental illness and trying to fit into a society that doesn't accept you for your feelings specifically. And I also think that an interesting book that I read as an adult was Twilight, because Bella is depressed and her thoughts and feelings are taken seriously by the author, which at that time was not really prevalent in YA. Like there are a lot of interior moments in that book where she's talking about how lost she is, how she's trying to find something in life, and she's depressed, even though it's not stated specifically. And I think a lot of books around that time period were a little bit coded in that way, where they didn't want to mention the name of what the character was going through, but it was the beginning of a groundswell of books that were coming out that would deal with the topic of depression more specifically. And also Speak was a really big moment for me when I read that book, that you could write about something so raw in such a raw manner. And that really gave me the bravery to think about writing about some of the things I write about now.
Kathleen, you really just like books that Kristen Stewart movies are based on. Admit it.
No, we all like Kristen Stewart, don't we?
I do.
Her whole like being is, she's feeling these things inside, like very well. And so I'm like, I think Kristen Stewart really, I feel like she understands us.
She captures it pretty well, I think.
She does, and I think that's really important. And off topic, like you were talking about the OC, I feel like the whole thread of Grey's Anatomy, where you're following like Meredith's life, that was the first time on TV that I really saw a woman in particular coming from an abusive background and working through everything like in time. Like she's depressed, she has issues, drinks a lot, she can't like be around people, she has problems connecting, she has trust issues. Like her whole arc is one like long, beautiful story about, a woman trying to find herself through like the muck of her past. So,
when you're speaking of shows, One Day at a Time, the mom on that show, the new one, yes, the new one, she has, she's dealing with a mental illness, and she does what I do sometimes, is that she just decides, I don't want to take my medicine for whatever reason. She'll just throw her medicine out, which I think is another thing that we don't see a lot of, or actually, I take that back. We do see a lot of that, but to see it from a woman, especially a woman of color, to see like her dealing with not only is the whole like thing about not taking your medication being part of the illness, I think, at least in my case, but also the cultural and familial implications of it as a woman of color and a woman with a culture.
So one of the first books that I thought of when you were asking Rachel, and then Ronni, when you were just saying about someone who stops taking their medication is When We Collided by Emery Lord, which is one of the first books I can remember reading about the main character who's dealing with a mental illness and mental health issues, like on the page, and she's struggling with wanting to go off her medication, which is something I try to do differently in my book, and it sounds like a lot of us did too, which is we want therapy and medications and these things to be seen as like good, positive forces in people's lives that they don't need to be scared of. But I just remember When We Collided hit me really hard because we got this like fully flawed, messy character who's, struggling with something, but she's trying really hard, and she gets to have a love story and like a full complicated life, but it doesn't have a tragic ending, where we've seen some other mental health stories that have really sad, tragic endings. So this book doesn't, and it just meant a lot to me. And then also just a quick note about a TV show that I thought of is Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which I love, deals a lot with mental health things. And at the beginning, you're not sure, what to think about Rachel and her character, but then you like completely fall in love with her. And then she goes through her own journey of getting a diagnosis and sometimes fighting it, but then sometimes accepting it, and just comes out like a lot happier and stronger at the end. So I really loved watching that one too.
Well, everybody sort of already said all of the things that I was thinking of. So one thing that I really liked was last year, Erin Hahn put out a book, You'd Be Mine. And one of the characters in it is really struggling, and he's younger. I mean, of course, you have like some of the fun of like, he's a rock star and all that kind of stuff. But he's also struggling with some depression and alcoholism and running away from a lot of his feelings, and also kind of hiding them in this other girl who's also running from a lot of her emotions. So I thought it was really great to see how that kind of was handled again, and how sensitively it was handled, because you don't see a ton of like substance abuse and how that is kind of like the comorbidity. Oh my God, I'm tripping over all my words now. We're gonna have to edit this one. But you don't usually see a lot of how substance abuse can tie in with mental health issues. And so I was really excited about that, because in some of the work that I've done with at-risk kids and stuff, that's something that I see all the time. A lot of times it goes hand in hand, especially when you're dealing with kids who don't have access to the mental health channels, like we were talking about early, and they try to self-medicate or hide from things. So that was one where I really liked how it was handled. But then, of course, outside of Unrequited, Darius the Great, like those are all, I think, those are the ones that I'm really like shoving in people's hands all the time. And I think that that's some really important rep.
Excellent. And then our last thing, because we're running out of time, what is the reason that you really you all do so well with this? Like, writing for teens, talking about mental health on page, like what was behind that choice? Why do you love doing it? And what maybe do you hope to see more of in the future?
I mean, I can keep going first. I mean, this isn't me like bragging, but like I feel like since I was a teenager, like such a short amount of time ago, I remember these feelings and feeling the way I did in high school, and how things that I ingested, the media that I looked for, could have helped me figure out some things. Because looking back on it now, I was a very depressed teen. I had very heavy anxiety. I had a lot of dysphoria about my gender, lots of fun stuff. So like mostly that's why I write, is I don't I don't have a time machine, so I can't go back and give these things to teenage me. But if I have the ability to hand my books to teens today, and they can see that things do get better, and that therapy is a good thing, and that sometimes, you know, you need medication and that's not a bad thing, I feel like I've done a good job. If that makes any sense. Like if I can tell these kids that, you know, if I can try and help them out, then I feel like I've done my job.
I'm right there with you, Mason. I feel like my depression didn't really set in till I was in college, but again, I had no idea. I just thought something's wrong. I don't know how to fix this. I'm in this therapy, but I mean, it's a free college therapy, so like you're not getting a lot out of that. And my friends didn't really understand either, so I really wanted the book to even give people like me who are like language to understand what I was going through, but also to give the people who are around people who are dealing with that also language, because I got a lot of you need to suck it up, people are worse off than you, get over yourself. And I think that maybe if they knew really what was going on inside my head, that they would have used nicer language. I at least I hope. And I think like when people just don't get it, they don't understand. And I hope that my book gives them tools from both sides to understand, like, this is what I'm going through, or this is what my friend's going through. How can I help them, or what can I do, or what tools can I show them to use? So yeah, again, it's a tool. I want it to be a tool, but also, you know, a love story to let them know that, hey, I have this, I feel unlovable, but people do love me. I can love myself too, even though I do have this. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that was very important. Something I was very mindful of also when I was working on Verona Comics was that I really wanted to kind of give them some resources and give them the language, and you know, maybe they'll read it and recognize themselves in it, or you know, they can relate to, you know, the things that Jubilee goes through, loving someone that's going through all of that. It was also super important to me that I put a resource page in the back of the book. So some of the things that we talk about, you know, especially like when Jubilee starts exploring some of her feelings about codependency that's developed, I wanted to make sure that when you got to the end of that, if someone saw themselves, they would know where to reach out for help. So I put a whole list of helplines and links to Codependence Anonymous and all those things. Just, you know, if someone reads that and recognizes themselves and then reaches out and uses those resources, that, you know, that was what I did it for.
And there will be a resource link in the description.
Yay!
I write young adult books primarily because I feel like teen readers are the most perceptive and receptive readers out there. Like they're willing to go places in a story that I think adults sometimes are not willing to go. Like they'll take any plot twist, they'll take anything you throw at them. They're like there for you every step of the way on each page. And I like that sense of emotional adventurousness. And I also write for the young adult audience because I'm trying to offer a possible pathway to a life that they might want to live and that they need to explore safely within the books that we're offering them, because sometimes they're afraid to talk about things in real life, but reading a book can give them the voice and the language and the possibility of what could be possible for them in their lives later on, if they can see themselves and see that pathway to things getting better or the way that they want things to be. I also think that's a reason that a lot of adults read YA is because in YA right now, we're talking about stuff that's not really talked about in adult novels. And we're talking about it in a much more blunt, raw, and honest way. Like when we talk about depression, we talk about depression. It's not just you know, a subplot or a side trait of a character. It is the book. And so I think that's why a lot of adults are turning to YA right now, is because they're finally getting to deal with their own issues. And the books that do that are the books that we're writing.
Okay, I know we're out of time, so I will be super fast. Basically, to boil this down to one sentence, is I wanted to write One Way or Another. It's a romantic comedy, and I just wanted to deal with some hard things and to show people who are struggling, like you can still have a full, happy life or love story and go on adventures and experience a lot of really amazing things.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. Hey y'all, thanks so much for tuning into this panel. If you're looking for more panels like it, make sure you check out the All by My Shelf playlist on our YouTube page. It'll tell you all of the different panels that you're able to watch.